Hello and thanks for watching this video. We've made this short film to show you some of the experiences of someone who cared for their mum with dementia. And actually I hope that it gives you a lot of insight and understanding as to what you can do as a healthcare professional or a member of the public to really help people get through what can be quite a difficult experience. We've made this video for Dementia Awareness Week and I hope that you find it inspiring and moving. So joining me today to talk about his experiences is Tommy Whitelaw. So Tommy, thanks for being with us here today. So Tommy, tell us a little bit about your mum.
Well, she was my mum, she was my best friend. My mum passed away last September, a year last September. But my mum was always there for me in my own life and getting on with my own life. And any time I made a mistake, my mum was always there to help me put my life back in track. Or that was the one person that could always made things better. And in amongst the good times, and I had quite an exciting life before caring for my mum. I made quite a lot of mistakes. I was pretty good at making mistakes now and again. And at every occasion, my mum helped me get back on the right road and understand the mistakes I made and understand a bit of how I made them and how not to in the future.
So Tommy, when did you first notice that things weren't quite right with your mum and that you thought she might have dementia?
Well, there was a few things. From a distance, a few people had been in touch to say they were, a few neighbours and some family members to say they were becoming a bit concerned about my mum. I just thought while I was away, my mum was getting a bit, my mum was getting a bit older, and these things happen. And there was a couple of things actually. My mum was an incredibly hard-working mum. We never had a lot, but the house was different, the structure was different, the conversation was different, and there was a fear in my mum's eyes that I'll never forget. Still amazing love in my mum's eyes, but. Quite often when you're a son, the fears within your eyes and your mum or your dad or the kind of that strength that's there takes away your fear. But there was a fear in my mum's eyes that my mum knew that things were changing, and they were. Lots of things had changed. But there was lots of things like my mum's bills hadn't been paid for a while, and all these little signs were coming. But one of the biggest things was no reaction. This worry of, the whole journey home to Glasgow, this worry of, oh, my mum's just, she's going to be disappointed when I tell her this. But there was no disappointment. There was no connection from the conversation I was having. But I still had no clue about dementia then. I look back at that now with a clearer head. At the time, I kind of thought, I don't understand this. That was easy, or it wasn't the reaction I expected. And that was the start of the next months and year of big changes.
Do you remember the first time you went to someone who was a healthcare professional and spoke about what was going on with your mum to them? Do you remember that occasion?
I remember the day my mum was diagnosed, and it kind of set the theme for the next 5 and a bit years, really. The day my mum was diagnosed, my mum was in hospital for a couple of weeks getting a few checkups for quite a few health issues at the time. We were trying to find out what was wrong for a few things. And we were sat down and told, your mum has vascular dementia and someone will be in touch. And I kind of remember thinking then, well, we'll be all right, I can look after my mum. And kind of walked out, but nobody was ever really in touch, and that kind of started the theme of loneliness and this lack of understanding. We suffered from a lack of understanding within it. We didn't quite understand what was happening, and quite often from people with good intentions and with the best intentions didn't quite understand how we were living or how we were feeling.
So there's a really interesting story you've told before about the day you went to a clinic and you got on the bus. So do you want to share that with us? Well,
that was at the end of the year. We kind of made a decision. I still didn't know I was a carer. I had no understanding of carers, all these things. I was just looking after my mum. But loneliness had set in then. There was the start of loneliness. People that used to visit kind of stopped visiting, and people who used to phone up. And this kind of conversation where people say, if you ever really need me, you know where I am. But we never had to really need them. They used to come and visit, They used to find out how my mum was, and they were part of our lives. So that was one of the big changes. But after that, after the third year, the kind of last year of the third, our life really was, you know, getting up in the morning and really just thinking, if we make it to tonight, if we can get through today and get to bed tonight, well, tomorrow, tomorrow's another chance. Yeah. And when I look back now, that's just not living, that's struggling every day. But I got up one day and just couldn't, that kind of thing of thinking, if we get through today till tomorrow, it just felt too far away. It felt impossible that I just couldn't think. We were in turmoil. We were both frightened, and we were lost. There was two people in the house lost, and we were at an absolute crisis. And I was 47 actually, and I tried to get, and I knew there was a health centre with a social work department and different bits in it. And I took my mum out with her hand and just kind of sat crying in the bus because I thought I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, everything just felt impossible that day. And just got the bus there just crying and walking towards it I was crying, and walking in the doors of it I was crying. And I went to the reception desk and asked if somebody could help me, could help my mum. Could help get my mum the care she needed really, and she deserved, but absolutely needed, and could help me in many ways, but help me care for my mum. Help me. I wanted to care for my mum, and I just didn't think I could do it. And I was told you can't just walk in. You have to make an appointment to come in here. There's a system in place, and I was handed a post-it sticker with an 0800 number on it, and told to come back another day. But inside me, another day didn't exist. It was just too far away. And looking back at that, in fact, on the day as we left, we walked out. We actually walked out with less hope than we walked in. And I think that's the saddest thing about that, to really need help and try and ask for it, and to feel you've got less hope than before you asked the question. And sometimes that puts you off asking for help because it leaves you feeling hopeless. But going back that day, the thing that stood out was that hurts the most is on the bus going there, people were looking at us, because I was 47 and I'm sitting crying, and my mum's sitting wondering and lost because doesn't understand why I'm crying. And people in the street were looking at us because they could see we were kind of struggling. And in the waiting room where the reception desk was, there was lots of people sitting waiting to be on their appointments. Were looking at us because they could see that two people really needed help. And it was absolutely dreadful. It was, you know, you've good days and you've bad days, and days that you think you can do it, and days you think you can't, and days that you just, it's full of joy. And that was one of the most dreadful days. There's dreadful days that stand out looking back, and that was dreadful. That bus journey home, I felt we were finished.
Do you have other experiences where you came in contact with people in the health service and it wasn't right? It didn't feel right to you. It didn't feel like it was the best way of speaking to you or serving you and your mum best.
I think on a couple of occasions or a few, my mum one day out in the garden, my mum fell over. We were bringing the laundry in, and my mum had fell. We had a little trim round the garden. And my mum fell over and had lost the ability to put her arms out. You or I would have put her arms out to protect herself. But my mum fell over and landed straight on her head on the rim, and had split her head open. And I rushed my mum to hospital in a taxi. I got a towel round and I was panicking, and it looked terrible actually. But my mum never said a word. My mum, there was no reaction really. But we got to accident and emergency and waited and to someone to see us. But getting in there, the reaction was to start asking my mum a list of questions of, because it was a head injury, because my mum had banged her head, Does she know what day it is? Does she know what building she's in? Does she know her name? And I was trying to plead with them and ask them that my mum doesn't know the answers. Before my mum fell, my mum didn't know, couldn't remember her name, or which day it was. Or in fact, my mum didn't know she was in her house. My mum would ask to leave the house quite often, saying she wanted to go home. And I was almost treated like a naughty school child. I was handed a leaflet on head injuries and told that we are the professionals, and this was actually called for a more senior nurse, because I was in tears. I was begging them that if you ask me the questions, I'll be able to tell you if there's a difference in my mum, but looking at the fear in my mum's eyes, because not knowing who you are and actually not realising that you don't know who you are is terrifying. And my mum was scared, getting more scared, but they wouldn't allow me into the conversation. And a more senior nurse came out and gave me a leaflet and told me to sit down and read up on head injuries. And I think we all lost out of that. My mum would have been less fearful. I could have given them more knowledge, and they would have understood quicker how to give my mum the best care. Instead of that, this triangle of people was frightening. And looking back, it was a dreadful experience, because at the centre of that, and if we talk about people being at the centre of that should be my mum treated with care, comfort, understanding and kindness. And the person at the centre of that was being treated and fearful and absolutely terrified. And the result of that was they wanted to keep my mum in for an overnight observation, and I took my mum home, because I felt that they weren't going to listen to anything I was trying to explain about my mum. And I could tell better if my mum, if they would have listened, I could have told them how things to look out for, things that my mum would know or might not know. And I took my mum home that night, because I felt that I would have a better understanding if there was a deterioration because of the head injury.
What would you have liked to have seen elsewhere in the health service? What would you have liked to have seen from people when they spoke to you? And what would you like to have seen from the public and friends? You were talking about that isolation earlier. What could people have done to have made that better for you both?
I think there's a couple of things. I think I was part of it a little bit as well. I think this lack of understanding and this whispering of dementia that's right across society, really. So maybe in our case, I felt I was protecting my mum, because I didn't want people to see my mum sometimes, and she was agitated. And so what you do is you kind of push people away. Oh, I don't want people to see. And you think you're being protective at the time. So you push people away, and other people just don't come. So you end up with no one. And that's a big issue for carers. I've been travelling around, and we end up with sole carers. But I think what I'd like to have is for people to just take a wee bit of time to find out a wee bit about my mum. I often heard my mum described as, oh, that's the wee woman with dementia. But that was Joan Whitelaw. You know, well, it was my mum, but it was Joan Whitelaw. It's our mums, our dads, our brothers and our sisters. And often when we do that, we have no chance of getting to know the wonderful life that people have led, are living, and how we can support them to live. You know, and to that I found that frustrating. I think I'd like to have more time. Quite often as well, we're ticking boxes, and life isn't. It's not about a box, is it? It's an evaluation form of what works just now. I think we have to get better at what works tomorrow as well, not just what works today. Big changes will come along as time goes on with dementia. And quite often it felt as if it was the first time I told someone, my mum, who was involved in my mum's care, whether that be at the hospital or the GP or the podiatrist, or and when these big changes came, and they came constantly, we had to go through this whole routine again, as if it was a surprise to everybody that my mum had dementia. And that held us back really from getting the help that would have been a benefit to my mum, would have given my mum a better chance.
You've described, obviously, incidents where you've come in contact with people in the health service and it hasn't been great, but there were some instances where people really surprised you with how kind and caring they were. And do you want to tell us about some of that?
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and the difference it makes. We in my mum, these changes that came, they kept knocking us down. Just as we thought we had a routine, you know, we built a routine that at times that we struggled, that we couldn't get, we almost thought we couldn't get through, but we built routines in routines that gave us the best chance. It gave my mum the best days, and lots of that was to stop my mum being fearful. If I could keep fear away every day, it was a great day. I didn't want my mum to be scared. If my mum wasn't, all these little things, and we learned, you know, things that made my mum fearful or she didn't like, we adjusted them, but it was always learning. But at all times, we'd keep getting up and these massive changes would come, and then we'd have to retry again and kind of refigure it out and regroup and re-explain and kind of re-struggle and sometimes re-smile or you know, these things that came. But I got up one day to give my mum her medication and her breakfast. And my mum had an accident in her bed. And it was that quick. And my mum was double incontinent. And before that I had struggled through it. I would put my mum's clothes out in the order she wore them in the hope, and always kind of help my mum, but looking away. And I would sit outside the bathroom, but things were getting a bit harder. But I knew that morning that was forever, because everything was always forever. When big changes came, it was forever. We didn't go back. We had to start from where we were and make the best of that. There was no going back. But it was absolutely dreadful. And all I could think is I didn't want my mum to sit like that for a second. My mum lived with dignity and did the best she could every day, as I tried to do as a son. And I wanted my mum away from that, but I didn't know what to do. And I thought, if I get a bath and I run it and fill it up with bubbles, I can get my mum in the bath and I won't see my mum naked. Because how would my mum feel about that? How would my mum feel about her son seeing her like that? And how did I feel about seeing my mum in such a private, delicate, intimate position? But I wanted my mum at her best. And I got my mum with my eyes closed, and I got my mum in my bath, but it was absolute turmoil. And we struggled through it, but I wanted my mum to. One of the things that stands out that day is I just wanted my mum's hair to smell beautiful again, because you knew you were standing beside my mum because her hair smelled beautiful. And you knew you were beside her. That's my memory. And I just wanted my mum's hair to smell beautiful, to hide everything that had just happened. And I got her out and I stripped to bed and got my mum settled. But I knew in my heart it was forever. And I thought, do we get through this? And all the things that we kept thinking, do we get through them? Once again, is how do we get through this one? And I kind of phoned up and tried to get some help, some advice for an incontinence nurse. But I was told it was June, and 2 were on holiday and 2 were off sick. And I'm not the only. You're not the only person that needs help today. But my mum really needed help that day. The dignity, all these things were in question, and we were in turmoil. And then she said, the lady said to me, "If you phone up every morning and complain, you'll get pushed up the queue." And I refused to do that because my mum wouldn't like me for doing that. My mum didn't do that. That's stealing somebody else's opportunity and dignity in many ways, and I couldn't do that because I've got to try and make decisions that my mum would make. They're not my decisions. I'm trying to make decisions that my mum would make. If I'm trying to be her voice and trying to think, how would my mum feel about this? What would my mum say about this? And what action would my mum take? And I didn't. But that led to my mum getting some sores, and we got some pads delivered that didn't quite fit my mum, and I really didn't know what to do with them while I was waiting on someone to come and visit. But I phoned the GP, kind of in tears again, quite a lot of the things. And we did smile a lot. You know, my mum brought joy quite often. But that was another day of crying. And I phoned the GP and asked, what do I do here? And he actually tried to tell me the same story because the incontinence nurses were connected via the GP. And I didn't really want to hear about it. Somebody had already told me that 4 or 5 days previous about 2 being off. And I said, I can't. I don't want to hear that today. I can't hear that today, but my mum looks sore, in amongst keeping my eyes shut and kind of almost peeking to try and get things right, that we needed help. And he said he would get a district nurse to come and visit to give us some support and advice, and he said she'll come on Thursday. And I knew she was coming on Thursday, and I thought, if I get my mum bathed, because my mum has to be at her best. You know, when I was a wee boy, if you were going to the doctors or the hospital, you get flung in the bath, because you had to be at your best. Somebody was going to examine you or undress you or look at you in a private manner. And my mum would certainly have wanted to be at her best if someone was going to come in and examine her. That's really important, I think. I thought, if I get my mum in the bath about 12:30, but it was the same turmoil with my eyes closed and bubbles so that I wouldn't see my mum. And the door went, and the district nurse arrived early. And she shouted, and I invited her up the stairs and said, oh, you're a bit early, I'm bath, because I wanted, when she came in, to my mum to be her best pyjamas on and her hair smelling beautiful, because that's how my mum would like to have been presented to be. If my mum could have done that for herself that day, that's exactly how my mum would have been at her best. But as I heard her walking up the stairs, I just couldn't stop crying, and I think I cried so she would hear me. I mean, I look back at it, I think I just wanted someone to hear how I felt inside as a son. And I think I cried louder, maybe, so she would just hear me. And it was amazing. And and the kind of door, I said, I'm in the bathroom, and the door opened, and she never said, she didn't have to say a single word at that point or ask a question. What she saw was a mum who needed help and a son who wasn't quite sure if the help that he was given was right. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she told me I was doing brilliant. She told me I was doing a great job. One of the first or few people to tell me that, and that was at 4 and a bit years of caring for my mum, to tell me that I was doing a good job of looking after my mum. And she knelt down and introduced herself to my mum and quietly. And I'm still trying to stop crying. And she showed me how to wash my mum. She goes, look, here's what you do. And she showed me how to lift my mum up. And then she showed me how to dry my mum like a lady, I describe it, because I'm sure that's how my mum dried herself, and she could have for herself like a lady. And she was absolutely amazing. And she took us in and she sat us down, and she said, I'm going to organise a wee bed that moves up and down, a hospital bed. And I actually said, I don't know about a hospital bed. It feels like the end. It feels like my mum's going to die if you're going to order that. She says, no, that's not what we're talking about. I'm going to get a bed, and it'll save you lifting your mum, and you can move it. She was absolutely brilliant. And then 45 minutes later, she walked out our door. And the thing about it, and the way up those stairs, I didn't know if what I was doing was right, if it was the best for my mum, or if I could continue to do it. And 45 minutes after she left, I absolutely knew that I could do it. And there's a few things that stand out about that. She didn't even know she was doing it. She was just being a great nurse. That's what good nurses do. They recognise that you're most vulnerable. They recognise that you really need help, and they put their hand on your shoulder. And I've said before, and I'll say it forever. If I met that district nurse tomorrow, I would tell her thank you. And if I saw her again the next day, I would tell her thank you again for recognising and for putting her hand on my shoulder and making it better. And she didn't even know she was doing it. She was just being a great nurse. And she left another amazing gift. My mum was fearful of the environment or situations. And at that point, before we used to be able to put films on in the television, but my mum was scared of the television, it was frightening her. And she gave me the strength and the knowledge, and continued after that I gave my mum her personal care until she passed away. But also 3 times a day for the rest of my mum's life, she wasn't frightened by a stranger coming in to give her personal care. Because my mum wasn't frightened of me. I was frightened of trying to do things sometimes because I didn't know how to do them. But my mum wasn't frightened of me. And what an amazing gift to give somebody, isn't it? That for the rest of your life, of all the times you might be frightened, I've cancelled them out 3 times a day. And I'll never forget her for that. And I think that's who every nurse really is at heart, isn't it? I think that's the difference that's the difference that nurses, care assistants are the people we engage with. That's the difference that they can make to the lives of the people they meet. And it's everlasting.
So you go all over the country and you talk to nurses and doctors and other healthcare professionals about your experiences and about Joan's experiences. And I know you're encouraging people to make pledges to change their behaviour for the way that they talk to people like Joan and like you, and the way they behave. What sort of things are people saying to you that they're going to change as a result of hearing your experiences?
Well, I think there's a couple of things in it. It's you know, the campaign that I started was asking people to share their experiences with me. And that's all comes from about understanding and the engagements. The bit that shines out for that is the people we meet along the way that make it a beautiful letter to read. But it's also people that make it a dreadful letter to read. And the pledges is there's a couple of things that I'm trying to let people like me who were lonely and lost that we do care. We do care about each other. But the pledges the pledges are really a personal pledge to themselves. And I'm also going to go back to people who've made a pledge and ask them, how did you get on with that pledge? What stopped you fulfilling it? There's quite an interesting thing to ask. But the pledges have just been the most incredible, and I hope they inspire others. I hope when people make them. I was speaking at a university to student nurses, and one of the young students took a photo of her pledge before she handed it to me, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" She goes, "Well, I'm going to be a nurse for the rest of my life, and every time I'm having a hard day, I'm going to read my pledge. I'm going to keep it in my phone, and if I'm ever having a hard day, I'm going to read it and remind me how I felt." So that's one side, but the words that are in it is taking time, listening, engaging, and quite a lot of personal sides to that as well. There was a beautiful pledge from a nurse who said, "My new neighbours just moved in about a year ago, and I've never really introduced myself to them, but I know the husband and I know the wife has dementia. And as soon as I leave work tonight, I'm going to knock on their door and ask them if they're all right, if they're okay." And to me, that's a big pledge, you know, that's an introduction. I'm going to go and knock on my neighbour's door tonight. Because caring isn't just within the walls of a hospital or our homes. It's in everything we do. And I hope that these pledges, I hope that people might be inspired by them. I think we can inspire the next generation of nurses and doctors and care assistants, or maybe each other. And maybe remind ourselves of why we wanted to be a nurse, or why we want to do the thing we're doing, and what it really means to me to do that. And I'm going to work as hard on the pledges as I worked on collecting all the letters. But I'm going to go back to everybody and ask them, how did you get on? In fact, somebody just emailed me 2 nights ago to say they've fulfilled their pledge. They made a wee pledge about 4 weeks ago, and they've fulfilled it, and they're going to share it with me, how that felt. But I hope, I'm trying to do the pledges in a different manner, that I'm not asking people to sign to a pledge, much like the letters. I'm sharing the story of how I feel inside, and the story of the people who've been writing to me, and the experiences, good and bad, and just asking people a couple of things. Is there anything that you're doing just now that you think you might want to stop doing? Is there anything that you're doing just now that you think other people should know about because it might help them? And that could be within wards. And is there a pledge you would like to make? And it's really interesting what's coming in from those 3 questions at the moment and quite a lot of that is coming in of what people might want to stop doing, or think maybe something that should be stopped done within that board or trust or even ward. So, and I'm hoping somebody like yourself might help me with all that one day, Jenny, and look through all of that and see what kind of message we can take from that.
Yeah.
To take to a wider audience.
Yeah, we definitely could do. We definitely should. That's a great idea. Tommy, thank you so much for coming in and talking about Joan and talking about your time with her and your life with her. It sounds like you've had some real ups and downs, but I'm delighted that you've had some great experiences of healthcare professionals, and hopefully you can inspire everybody to be more like that. So thank you.
Thank you for today. Thank you, Jenny.